team would start to reach and get overwhelmed by the output of damage and willingness to play the scrap that red team kind of took to the bank. As they get another well-composed, well-oiled machine of a team coming up next. Losers finals, Cake and Penguin up against Akashi and Giga.
I'm very curious to see what ends up when you have two apps just trying to control space here. There is going to be a lot of projectile pressure that Cake's going to have to just navigate through. And likewise, like Giga and Cake having to try to navigate the madness of the clouds from both ends, both their own teammate on top of the enemy ops, is going to make for a lot of active space controlled by projectiles. So I'm very curious to see if those just 2 to 3 to 4 hit combos see themselves getting anything done outside of like just the very far separated 1v1s, or if we end up finding ourselves in the 2v1s, which it's kind of a done deal once we get to that point. But to get to that point, as we start things off with
a classic start for so many of these players. What I think is really good about having this ABSA on the side of Blue Team is the fact that so much of the strength that Akashi was doing in the latter half of Game 5 was playing the outside zone. But because you can do that same utility with your own ABSA and chase down and start poking at Akashi and keeping him away from doing that, you can swap out your teammates so effectively as
you got the wrong one.
Raid comes down and hey, all of this is in the favor of red team up until that forward air placement. So good from Penguin as she evens up a four stock across the board.
Well, there's a whole lot of spinning going on, and Cake is going to take full advantage of that. Trying to make something out of this edge guard here. I find it funny how the opposites have gravitated towards fighting each other. Sort of nullifying the threat of the cloud zoning that I was a bit worried about.
No! Tragedy has struck for red team, just getting caught by a sweet spot fair and not the right DI as well. Really tough transition on what was a super even game is starting to really pivot towards the opposite, and Cake is just always there and ready to pick up the scraps. Like, we're always ready to find that punish.
Like, trying to wait right outside the outskirts of any of these scuffles is a really smart way to play out those. Like, you're putting yourself in the least amount of danger, and especially as a character like Horseburn, where your positioning is key, you can just take full advantage of, like, yeah, let everyone else play their game. I'm just going to win it once it's done.
That's what the disguise does. Like, it's why Smoke and his insane initial dash, like platform boosting, like all of these different ways to move and get out of risky situations allows him equally to find just the right spot to where, like, oh, after everybody's done with their kerfuffle, I'm just going to put in a down tilt here. And if I get a down tilt, well, then suddenly the entire world is opened up to find hitfall up airs, to find back airs, and to close out stocks whenever the soup is stirred.
And like the positioning is all key, because it's not like he's waiting on the very other edge of the stage, like letting Penguin do her thing. Like, waiting right outside of wherever the fight is centered. Now, mind you, red team can completely turn this on its head if they end up winning out, getting themselves suddenly into multiple 2v1 situations in their favor. But that's the gamble that you pay, and honestly, it's working very well for Blue Team, especially moving into Game 2. They're carrying their momentum right along.
Man, Penguin, she has just been... We were talking about Cake's positioning for a little bit, but as Cake drops that stock, it's actually been Penguin who's been finding so many of these proper pickups, always ready to put out a sweet spot back or sweet spot fair, like spacing around the opponent so well, and quite honestly dominating the ABSA Ditto that we have been seeing come out from these previous 2 games.
And again, I'm glad you highlighted the ABSA Ditto, because Penguin and Akashi just finding themselves just ready to swing as often as they can. I've also noticed they're also keeping themselves close enough to the scuffle that Cake and Giga find themselves in, where they can hit their teammates back in towards stage, which is something that we haven't gotten a chance to really discuss, but in this game in particular, I'm noticing is a huge factor, where you have your teammate to rely on in case you want to go for a really risky edge guard.
You're absolutely right, Frank, but the pivot there from Penguin to go off the chase of Akashi, hover around the mid zone, so when Cake landed the gentleman, it turned into a down air, and then both players meeting at the point of impact yet again, yet there was no casualties this time. It was just an explosive finish and a dominant one at that for blue team.
It's looking a bit tough.
It's looking a bit rough.
Like, blue team is just able to... The fluidity in their game plan that we had seen throughout that game 2 is what makes me the most concerned about red team. It's not the execution in the game plan. It's their willingness to adjust it on a dime. And, like, Penguin having the presence of mind to, like, just completely keep Akashi on hold and then just throw him away and just move into the 2v1 situation and help Cake secure a kill and then move back to fighting Akashi. Like, that's just amazing play. Like, to be able to focus on that many layers is just a mark of a great player.
You see this a lot in different types of like traditional sports defense. It's like Akashi almost playing the prevent, playing this outside zone for much of game 1 and 2, and it worked to the detriment as constantly having to like push outward to try and contain and then come back in to support Giga. This time they're changing it up a little bit. They're more coming straight into the middle and forcing things into the fray, which is why I like the pick of Endless Abyss, aka Training Room, aka whatever you want to call it. Like, we're seeing Akashi take much more of an aggressive, more pushing the envelope type of stance. While they are down right now, it is giving red team a little bit more opportunity to find damage instantaneously and to find pickups like that. Still down 1 stock, but definitely in a position where you can turn this around in a drop of a hat.
Yeah, no, it's a heavy gamble on the game plan, but I do think it is one that can ultimately pay off for them. It's just a matter of finding that one instance where all of a sudden the stock count is just going to trade to their favor. And with how volatile the style of play is across all 4 players, there is that high likelihood. Like, the lead that blue team has right now is very tenuous. They need to try to slow this game down.
Oh, what a pickup there.
That'll do it!
So immediate and how things can fall into their favor, but another stock is dropped. The real trouble here is just how low a percent Penguin is. Being so hard to hit and playing such a perfect outbox type of style with a character that already spends so much time in the air.
Even though Akashi's sitting at 119, he has to move in every opportunity he gets, lest they lose momentum here. But an amazing pickup from Penguin. Just only the 1 straight hit from Giga. That was all they needed for red team to fall apart in an instant.
It's that awareness that becomes so prevalent in doubles. Like, whether it has been hits from her teammate or hits from the opposing team, she's always was ready, like, oh, yeah, I can find an up air here. I can find a forward air or a back air. Just having that many omnidirectional finishers that you can